So this is just another graph of the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid graph. You'll see a couple things about it. One, you'll see that long term, it's mainly the health cost projections that are driving these numbers. It's a little misleading because the Social Security numbers are actually fairly significant. We drop from about 3 workers per retiree to 2 workers per retiree over the next 20 years as the baby boomers retire. If you have a pure pay-as-you-go system and you want to do the math, and by the way, this is actually, if you understand this math, you understand almost everything in the Social Security projections until you start converting it to present value and trust and everything else. You drop from 3 workers to retiree to 2 workers per retiree, and you want to maintain, suppose it happened instantaneously, and you wanted to maintain the benefit people have, you'd immediately have to raise tax rates by 50%. On the other hand, if you decided you wanted to keep tax rates constant, you'd have to lower benefits by 33%, and that's essentially the Social Security debate, because it's mainly a cash flow system, and we can talk about trust funds later if you want to, but long run they're not there anyway. But the other reason I wanted to show this graph is because I just wanted to show you that that if you think about this is 1940 to 2080, that's 140 years. This says that we have been and we're scheduled to continue to be on a path for 140 years and beyond of constantly devoting higher and higher shares of our national income to retirement and health and retirement. And to me, that's a societal decision. We don't necessarily have to think it always has to be that way. Now, there's a debate among economists. Some say, well, you know, as we get richer, we always want more health care, and as we get richer, we always want more years in retirement. Because leisure is you know, in our technical language, leisure is superior good, whatever. But that's defining leisure as I've got to retire or not retire. And of course, many of you in this room have had to face that decision. But if you think about that, that's a fairly unique. I'm convinced this totally comes out of the industrial age. This notion that, you know, actually in taxes we used to talk about one-horse shays. So this started the one-horse shay model of humans. One-horse shay, basically the notion was you drove along this one-horse shay until it basically collapsed and then you just replaced it. So it sort of had 100% depreciation instantaneously when it fell apart. And that's sort of how we treat people. I mean, it's if you really think about it, it's an absurd way to think about it. And yes, we want better things as society gets richer, but leisure, for instance, I don't even know what leisure is, quite honestly. Because leisure, in economics, leisure is sort of defined as doing nothing. I don't think anybody does nothing. I mean, I find those of you who know the mathematics of it know that it's actually used. It's used because they had to get the general equilibrium equations. They had to have a number to balance it, so they defined this extra thing as leisure. But what happens if leisure just means we want more of better things? And it might be we want easier time in the job, or we enjoy the job, or maybe we want more time when we have children to spend with our children. There's a lot of ways we can demand things that sort of fit in this category called leisure without necessarily having a model that as a society we're going to keep pushing in this one-horse shay version of the world. Here's the Social Security numbers again. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I pointed out that you basically have this growth from 2 workers per retiree, from 3 workers per retiree to 2 workers per retiree. And it basically causes this big bump up. The main point of this graph is how that's occurring right now. It's occurring right over this 20-year period as the baby boomers retire. After that, it levels out because the birth rate is assumed, has been, and is assumed to remain fairly constant at about replacement as you go out. And of course, here's the little trust fund build up, and here's now the spin down. So trust funds don't really give you too much, depending on whether you think you can spend them or not, give you too much coverage. So the basic line is, here's the cost, and we have to decide as a society, do we want to cover that cost or don't we? Here's where the real numbers are. These are health costs per person. I need to convert this graph to a per family basis. A per family, I don't know if people have done the numbers. Anybody here done the numbers on, maybe you've done it since health reform is a big debate, on average health cost per household? You can, if you read the graph, you can figure it out by multiplying, but anybody want to take a guess, or they already know? It's about $21,000, $22,000 per household. That's what we're already spending on health care. And so in current growth rates, you know, that means in another 10 years, it'll be $40,000 per household in another 15 to 15 years. So the cost...
Is that out of pocket or including insurance, the total?
That's basically taking the estimates by the Social Security actuaries who produce the National Health Care Expenditure numbers and just dividing it by number of households. So it includes everything from Medicare to Medicaid to paying for the National Institutes of Health and everything else. But the number is just the point is very, very large. And here's sort of another interesting, Bob and I actually talked about this in terms of the, and Denny, we talked about the health debate. You know, the health debate, and this isn't my talk today, so I'm not going to get too much detail, but and Hillary Clinton said this in the campaign, and I just heard somebody say it the other day again. It's basically this notion we shouldn't have to pay more than 10% of our income for health. But we're spending $20,000 per household, and households are not making on average $200,000. So if we can't spend more than 10% of our income on health, and healthcare is 17% of GDP going up to 20, and GDP is not money income, it's really closer to 25% of consumption is health, and 25% of money income, which is 25 to 30% of money income. We're already spending that. So if you tell people they can't spend more than 10% because they can't afford that, but they're spending 25, okay, you got to do something to get those numbers to add up, right? You know, this is a little bit of Yogi Bear math. You know, Yogi Bear once said that 90% of baseball was physical and the other half was mental. That's sort of the way we treat the cost of healthcare. So we got to do something about this. Later on, I'm going to get. I'm actually somewhat optimistic that there are forces in play if we're willing to let them move that actually are going to constrain us more than some people project. Here's another way of looking at the numbers. This doesn't even take into account the demographics of more people retiring. This is basically the Social Security and Medicare benefits for an average couple. I've got a 200 couple earning about $45,000, but basically this works for almost all couples, whether it's 200 or 100, or it's pretty close to these numbers. And so the blue part there shows you the Social Security benefit, and the red shows you the growing Medicare benefit. And this is the lifetime value of benefits. In about 1960, the value was a little less than $300,000. By 1985, it was about $575. Today, it's about $900. Actually, add in the value of for all of us that unless we're fairly wealthy, that we could also rely on Medicaid at some point. I think, what is it, two-thirds of people who are in a nursing home more than a year or two end up falling back on Medicaid because they've spent on their assets. So we got a little backup insurance policy there. So the average couple basically goes into retirement with a lifetime value of health and Social Security insurance of about $1 million. That's what they'd have to pay. They had to have money in a 401k account or an individual retirement account to pay for this stuff. Those of you who want the technical details, I use a 2% real discount rate, and I forgot what they need at age 65. So basically, we got people now getting $1 million package of benefits. You say, well, wait a second, don't the numbers tell me that we're really not providing that much in the way of help for the current elderly? Well, that's true. There's a couple things. One is what the current elderly get is not necessarily the same as what the new elderly get, because the system constantly builds up. So somebody 65 is going to get a much bigger package of benefits than somebody who's already 75. So you can't look at the average among the elderly to figure out the average among the newcomers. But the other thing you've got to look at here, which is really crucial, is, let's see if I included that graph here, I don't think I did, is the number of years of benefits, because that's long-term what really helps drive the numbers. And let me skip over discounting, because health costs are growing faster than interest rates, whereas Social Security doesn't grow at all in real terms. But you add up all these numbers over a number of years, and you discount back to figure out what the value of the account is. Crudely speaking, to get to $1 million, the simple story is if you give people $40,000 a year for 25 years, you get about $1 million. So the annual benefit isn't necessarily that high in this system, but the benefit's lasting longer and longer. The average male now at age 62 has an 18-year life expectancy. The average female has a 22-year life expectancy. You do the actuarial calculation, say the longer living of the two, right? Because if they're a couple, one or the other is liable to be shorter and one of the others is allowed to be longer. The average life expectancy for a couple is about 27 years after age 62, if they're both 62. If they have a difference in age, it might even be more. And of course, if they're healthy, they've lived a healthy lifestyle, it's allowed to be something like 30. So it's expected for an average couple, at least one person is going to make it to 90 in terms of retirees. And that's just today. You go out another 50, 60 years, the projection is there'll be another 5 years of life expectancy. So what also drives these numbers, in addition to health cost, isn't really so much the annual benefit and the annual cash benefit of Social Security. It's just all the number of years that we've added to the system. And then, actually, in point of fact, again, I can't remember whether I did this or not.